My name is Angelo, and I've been fishing since I was a kid. My father always said that the sea was a demanding mistress. She gave, she took, and sometimes she gave nothing back. Maybe that's why I didn't cry when my brother Luca disappeared at sea. But 6 months later, I still can't accept that the sea kept him. It was a night like any other in Maratea, that little village on the Basilicata coast. The sun had set behind the mountains, and the lights of the houses seemed to hang in the darkness like upside-down stars. The old men were gathered near the small tavern, talking about the things they always talked about: fishing, the currents, and now the disappearances. 3 men had disappeared in less than a month. Their boats had been found drifting, intact, but them, nothing, until Paolo came back. Paolo was a fisherman like me, missing for 5 days. He was found wandering the beach, barefoot, with a vacant look that chilled you to the bone. Since his return, he hadn't spoken. Not a single word, just murmurs at night, as if he were repeating a prayer in a language no one understood. "Angelo, you'd better stay ashore tonight," Marco, my neighbor, said as I prepared my nets on the dock. "The sea is strange right now." "The sea is always strange," I replied with a shrug. But deep down, I knew he was right. For weeks now, something felt off. The nets often came back empty, and when we did catch something, the fish looked strange. Wounds that no known predator could have caused. Once, I found a squid with symmetrical marks carved into its flesh, like perfect circles. Still, I went out. The night was calm, the sea black and smooth as glass. There was only the steady sound of waves against my boat, and the faint clinking of the nets. But even in that silence, I felt like I was being watched. Around midnight, it began. First, it was a light faint on the horizon. It didn't look like a lighthouse or another boat. It was too low, almost underwater, and it changed color, shifting from blue to green, then white. I cut the engine to get a better look, but when I stopped, I heard it. A high-pitched whistling, coming from everywhere at once. Not the kind of sound the sea makes. It sounded more like a scream, but not human. I restarted the engine, ready to head back, but the light moved. It got closer, and that's when I saw it. A boat. Not a modern boat, but an old, rusty hull I had seen before. It was Luca's, my brother's, the one that had disappeared. I froze, unable to move. I knew it wasn't possible. The boat had sunk. We had all seen it swallowed by the waves. But there it was, floating just a few meters away, its wet wood gleaming in the moonlight. And on the deck, a figure. "Luca!" I shouted. The figure turned, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't Luca. Not really. The thing had his face, but something in its eyes wasn't right. Its eyes were too bright, too fixed. And when it opened its mouth to speak, no sound came out. Just that whistle, even louder. I wanted to flee, but my hands wouldn't respond. I just sat there, paralyzed, as the light grew stronger, enveloping me completely. And then, everything went black. I woke up with a start, my skin freezing, as if I had slept in a freezer. The light of dawn barely pierced the horizon, and my boat was floating, motionless, in the middle of a calm sea. I didn't know how I had gotten back here, or how much time had passed since it. I quickly checked my nets. They were torn, as if something sharp had slashed them. Not a single fish inside, but caught in the mesh was something strange. A black metal plate, covered in symbols I'd never seen before. It felt warm, vibrating, as if it were alive. A shiver ran through me. I threw the plate overboard. It wasn't the time to look for answers. I needed to get back. When I arrived at the port, people looked at me like I was a ghost. Marco ran up to me. "Angelo, where have you been? We've been looking for you everywhere." "What?" "But I went out fishing last night." Marco shook his head. "Last night? Are you kidding? You've been missing for 3 days. 3 days. I didn't say a word to anyone. Not to Marco, not to the old men in the village. But I saw their looks, felt their suspicion. To them, I had become like Paolo, a shadow, another piece of the puzzle they didn't want to put together. Paolo. I couldn't help it. I had to talk to him. That night, as the village slept, I went to his house. The door was ajar, creaking in the wind. Inside, he was there, sitting on a chair, staring at the wall, his lips moving silently. As I got closer, I heard his murmur. It wasn't a prayer, but a series of repetitive sounds. A kind of foreign melody, almost mechanical. "Paolo, what happened to you?" I whispered. He turned to me slowly. His eyes, they weren't human. The pupils were dilated, almost swallowing the iris. And when he opened his mouth, I saw something move in his throat, like an insect trapped inside. "You shouldn't be here, Angelo," he murmured in a deep, raspy voice. "Who are they?" I asked. "The ones who took you?" Paolo took my hand, his icy fingers against my skin. "They want you too. Because you're searching. Stop. Stop before they take you for good." Before I could ask another question, he collapsed, unconscious. I ran out. The light came back that night. I was at home, trying to make sense of it all. The light pulled me from my thoughts. Through the window, I saw it, offshore, but this time it seemed closer, as if it were calling me. I knew I shouldn't, but I took my boat and went toward it. The closer I got, the brighter the light became, the whistling too. But there was something else this time, a kind of song, like a choir of countless voices. It wasn't human. Suddenly, I saw them, figures, standing on the water, motionless, as if waiting. Their features were blurry, but some had faces I recognized. My brother was there. Luca. "Luca!" I shouted, my voice tearing through the silence of the night. But he didn't move. None of the figures moved, as if they were only an illusion. But as I got closer, they all raised their arms at once, pointing in one direction. Behind them, the water began to churn. A massive shape emerged from the depths, black and gleaming, like metal. It wasn't a boat. It wasn't an animal. It was something else. I froze, unable to move, as an opening formed on the object's surface. A blinding light struck me, and the last thing I heard before everything went black was a voice whispering my name. I woke up in total darkness, floating, as if my body were suspended in water. But it wasn't water. The substance around me was dense, viscous, and strangely warm. I wanted to move, but my body refused to respond. Then, the light came back, bursting from above, and I realized I was no longer on Earth. Around me, everything was organic. The walls seemed to throb gently, as if the place itself were breathing. Black veins ran along the walls, faintly glowing, pulsing with each beat. The air, or whatever it was, tasted metallic, and the silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the entire place was waiting for something. That's when I saw them. Creatures, tall, slender, with limbs too long and oval heads devoid of human features. No eyes, no mouth, just a smooth black surface where a face should have been. But I could feel them looking at me. No, worse, they were scrutinizing me, diving straight into my thoughts. One of them approached. It didn't move like we do. It glided through the air as if floating, and as it came closer, I heard it in my head, a cold, metallic, disembodied voice. "Why are you here?" I didn't answer. My mind was chaos. You seek answers. You seek your brother. A flash crossed my vision. Luca. He was there, sitting on a white table, motionless. His eyes stared at an invisible point, empty, as if he was nothing more than a shell. "What have you done to him?" I screamed, finally able to move a little. The creature didn't respond immediately. Instead, another image filled my mind. Men and women, encased in translucent cocoons, their bodies connected to black tubes. They floated, inert, but I could feel they were alive. Barely. "We learn. We use. Your bodies are weak. Your mind is strong." I barely understood what it meant, but a deep fear crept over me. They were using us as tools, experiments. They were remaking us. "Let him go. Take me, but let him go." The creature remained silent, then slowly tilted its head, as if studying me. "You are already ours." Suddenly, the ground beneath me began to vibrate, and a blue light flooded the room. I didn't know if it was an alarm or something worse. The creature started moving quickly, gathering as if preparing for something unexpected. I took advantage of the chaos. I rushed to Luca, still sitting on the table. His eyes turned to me, but they didn't seem to recognize me. "Luca, it's me. Angelo. We're getting out of here." He didn't move, but when I grabbed his arm, he stood, obedient. I pulled him with me, running blindly through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, each step echoing like a drum in this living place. We reached an immense room, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. In the center, an opening, a drop into the void. I knew it was our only chance. "We have to jump," I said to Luca, my heart pounding. He finally looked at me, and this time, something in his eyes seemed human, a glimmer of recognition. "Angelo, they're in you," he murmured, before his face twisted in an expression of terror. "What? What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he jumped, vanishing into the void. The light came back, burning, blinding me, and this time, I felt something inside me, a burning, something moving. I didn't have time to think before I woke up, lying on the beach of Maratea. The village found me there, alone. Luca was gone. Again. They brought me back home, and since then, the questions keep piling up. What happened up there? What did they do to me? Tonight, in the mirror, I saw something move under my skin, something that shouldn't be there. And I know this isn't over.